Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program funded and produced by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I'm John Clark. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
This is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone line. So if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet us at FFTVKNOX. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is again at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Just look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. We invite everyone to come along. Just don't preach, proselytize, or otherwise be a nuisance. Just come with friendly intentions. Yeah.
Right. We're always willing to discuss, but not to have any fisticuffs.
Right.
Okay. Well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The book club meets on the second Sunday, and the reflections group gets together for a potluck lunch on the fourth Sunday. Our book for July, which will be the second Sunday, is The Story of the Human Body, Evolution, Health, and Disease by Daniel Lieberman. View our websites for additional details, including times and locations of all our events.
Ever since the so-called New Atheist came into public view about 7 or 8 years ago, the topic of atheism has become prominent in religious discussions or in programs such as ours. But many people, particularly theists, don't really seem to understand what the term means, and they frequently harbor gross misconceptions about what atheism implies. Today, we are going to discuss several of these misconceptions to make our position clear. But before we could discuss these points, let us take a look at some items in the news.
Okay, well, back on March 7th, a decree from the Ministry of the Interior of Saudi Arabia prohibited, among other things, calling for atheist thought or calling into question the fundamentals of the Islamic religion on which the country was based. This was occasioned, at least in part, by the perception that atheism is no longer a taboo subject. At least 2 Gulf-produced television shows recently discussed it. And now we're learning there's a growing notion among many Saudis that religion is being misused by authorities to control the population. Wow, isn't that a revelation?
Yeah.
This disillusionment is seen in a number of ways, ranging from ignoring clerical pronouncements to challenging and even mocking religious leaders on social media. Fahad al-Fahad, 31, a marketing consultant and human rights activist, recently noted that he knows at least 6 atheists, and he says 6 or 7 years ago, I wouldn't have even heard one person say that. Not even a best friend would confess that to me. This may seem minor in a country of so many millions, but it does reflect at least some progress in bringing even hardline Islamist states into the modern world. So I think it's a first step of encouraging.
Right, and this is something that we all kind of understand, seeing that, I was brought up in a family that we paid a lot of attention to what missionary programs did, and these people, they face the same issues.
Yeah, but in Islamic countries, they're so hardline. Apostasy, giving up Islam, merits a death penalty in almost all Islamic countries.
Yep. In his recent deposition as a part of a sexual abuse lawsuit in Minnesota involving the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Archbishop Robert J. Carlson claimed to be uncertain that he knew sexual abuse of a child by a priest constituted a crime when he was auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis. According to a transcript released on Monday, June 9th, attorney Jeff Anderson asked Carlson whether he knew it was a crime for an adult to engage in sex with a child. "I'm not sure whether I knew it was a crime or not," quoted Carlson replied. "I understand today it's a crime." Anderson went on to ask Carlson whether he knew in 1984, when he was an auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, that it was a crime for a priest to engage in sex with a child. "I'm not sure if I did or didn't," Carlson said. Archbishop Carlson went on to admit that he never personally reported any incidents of sexual abuse to the police, though he says he encouraged parents to do so at least once. According to Anderson, Carlson was involved in handling sexual abuse cases in Minnesota for 15 years. Even if one accepts the dubious statement that Carlson did not know it was a crime for a priest to engage in sex with a child, you would think a priest would have some moral compass to tell him it was wrong. This is just another example of the Roman Catholic Church giving priority to protecting its image rather than taking a moral standard.
Yeah, I think this is despicable. It was a despicable testimony in my view. Well, here's another item that caught our eye in the news. A new Pew Research poll queried people about what their reaction would be if a family member married someone who had political views that differed from those of the family. More than 3/4 say the politics of their future in-laws don't matter. There were, however, pockets of discontent. 30% of Americans who have consistently conservative political views would frown upon a Democrat marrying into the family, as would 23% of solid liberals if a Republican married in. But even in these deeply political groups, the vast majority said they wouldn't care if someone of different political views married in. However, marrying an atheist is far more controversial. Nearly half the public would be upset if a family member married someone who doesn't believe in God. Discomfort with atheists joining the family far outpaces the level for gun owners, which is 19%, or someone without a college degree, 14%, or a different race, 11%, someone born and raised outside the United States, 7%. This one really surprised me. You know, half the people in the country would object to an atheist marrying into the family, but only 11% would object to somebody of a different race marrying in the family.
Right.
So that's progress in one way, but not in some others there. So anyhow, just 9% would be uncomfortable with the family member marrying a born-again Christian. In fact, all the attributes tested, this is the one that would bring about the most happiness, with 32% saying so. They'd like to have a born-again Christian in the family. And that's driven by the 57% of consistent conservatives and 42% of mostly conservative people who would be happy about a born-again Christian joining the family. So we atheists obviously have to keep working on our image, and that brings us to our topic today, some myths about atheism.
All right. The first myth,
a recent question on the game show Jeopardy made us think that people still have a lot of false ideas about the subject. So we thought we'd revisit some of these ideas. Dave Silverman, president of American Atheists, has put together a list of some of these misconceptions, and these will serve as a partial guide for us. But right now we have a call. So John, you want to take the call?
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring the caller on board. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Could we have a name or nickname for you? I think you said Joseph. Could you speak up a little?
Yeah, I said Joseph.
Okay, great. Hi, Joseph. You have a comment or question for us?
Yeah, I said a comment. The guy in the maroon shirt, you know, he just belched on the air, and he covered it up with his mouth. What are you guys actually talking about? Actually, you're not really talking about anything. You're just reading from papers.
All right. Today's show is What is Atheism? We're talking about the myths surrounding the word and why perhaps it's... All right. Goodbye, Joseph.
Goodbye, Joseph. And it is true that we have to do a little reading here. You know, in television stations you watch on television, they have teleprompters for people sitting and doing this. And unfortunately, we don't have a studio with a teleprompter. So we have to do a little bit of our reading off the papers here.
Yeah, make do with what we got, right? I mean,
make do with what we got.
Knoxville's finest right here. You know, don't hate on Knoxville, Joseph. Don't hate on Knoxville.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the definition of atheism given on Jeopardy.
Oh, the active principled denial of the existence of God.
Now, I'm not sure what that even means. Why active? Why principled? And even many, many people who claim to be atheists would not outright deny the possibility that gods could exist. Most atheists I know simply take the broad view that gods just don't exist, but they could be persuaded otherwise if there were any evidence. Now, this was made clear in recent debate by atheist Bill Nye, the science guy, and theist Ken Ham, the founder of the Creationist Museum. Someone during the question period asked each what would cause him to change his mind about the existence of God, presumably the Christian God, of course, and Bill Nye answered evidence, but Ken Ham, the theist, answered nothing. So that shows what the different mindset is among those people who claim to be atheists and theists. On the one hand, that the atheists are pretty open-minded about accepting whatever can be backed up by evidence, but the theist is going to believe what he wants to believe without the evidence. So anyhow, what do we mean by God as a singular noun? Human beings have imagined thousands of gods with different characteristics. But we'll take it to mean a Christian God. All-powerful, all-good, immaterial, etc., etc. Now, some atheists do take the strong belief that gods simply don't exist, but not many. So our position is just that atheism is justified belief that God does not exist. Of course, there's no absolute proof of this, just as there are no proof that God does exist despite centuries of apologetic arguments. So this brings us then to the first myth that one often hears about atheists.
Yeah, the first one, atheists are all the same?
Yeah. So, do you think atheists are all the same?
Well, I don't think all Christians are all the same. I don't think all atheists, well, I shouldn't compare Christians, but all theists aren't the same, right?
Right.
And just
In fact,
like that.
not even all Christians are the same.
Right.
How many Christian sects do we have?
I like to first start out with, because we're talking about atheism, we're going to talk about atheism versus theism. But theism isn't, people don't go around calling themselves theist. You know, and we've latched on to this word atheist, which has been criticized even with our own groups, within our own. And it's important to talk about, like, okay, so we had the Jeopardy definition, right? But I like this one better. The belief that no gods exist, that's fine.
I say an atheist definition there. You can rephrase it in somewhat different ways.
I would prefer to have said the lack of the belief.
Yeah, some people say it that way.
But that's just one or two criticisms in there. And so what is theism? Well, theism is a belief in a God. At least one. Yeah. And then we got polytheism that comes from there. You can't have polyatheism. I mean, I guess you could, but atheism is
polyatheism.
Right. We have Forrest is in the studio with us today, and he's saying, "I'm a polyatheist." So, and I guess we are probably polyatheists. But the point
that means we don't believe in any gods, right?
Yeah. Well, we may want to make another word for that. I just strong atheist was a word that Dawkins used in his book, which he didn't even quite have himself with. He wasn't an absolute. And I think most of us, it looks like we have another call, but right before we answer the call, let's get back to the atheist versus theist. Atheist, a lack of belief in a God. Theist, a belief in a God. And the number, let's forget all that right now. There are other ways to cut that pie, but let's bring the caller on board.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, caller. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
My name is Jaime.
One more time?
Jaime.
Jaime?
Si.
Okay. How are you doing? Do you have a comment or question for us?
I want to know about Peter Gazzinian.
I don't know who that is.
Okay.
I think.
Does Ralph? Oh.
No, I think it's kind of juvenile to make calls, even if you don't like a program or something of the sort. You got to grow up a little.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyhow, as we say, atheists are quite different. We have people in the rationalist group, some of whom are really flaming libertarians, and others of whom are really quite liberal. We have people who cover the whole spectrum on the problem of abortion, which is not a simple topic. Some people who believe that, getting rid of any fetus at any stage would be murder, and others who think that it's up to the woman right up to the moment of birth. So we atheists cover all sorts of ranges. Well, and we don't have a dogma that the church adheres to.
As soon as you say that, I kind of want to think of an atheist that does. And I might think of something like, I'm thinking of Bishop Shelby Spong, who's a man who, a lot of people aren't familiar with him, but he's a cultural Christian. He basically doesn't believe any of the supernatural aspects of the Bible. And we'll bring another caller on. All right. Hello, caller. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
It's your buddy, Chip.
You may want to send a word to our screener that this is the same individual calling back over.
That was Jeffrick.
Oh, who?
Oh.
Oh, was it Jeffrick? Oh man, I totally missed it. I thought it was. I jumped that one.
Sorry, Jeffrey. Call back.
Jeffrey, call back once more. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Tip of the hat to Joseph. Good move. Well played. Yeah, it looks like we got him back. Go ahead and send him in.
I can't tell.
Tell him to send him in.
Okay.
Waiting. Okay. Ready? Hey, Jeffrick, sorry about that. Try it one more time. Oh, all right. Maybe try back in a second. I'm not sure what's happening.
We'll get back to him.
All right.
So,
but, okay, so atheism versus theism. And then we came down to different types of atheists, and we were talking about Bishop Shelby Spong, who doesn't hold on to the supernatural qualities of Christianity by and large, and just takes it as a it's a nice story. It's got some things, and if you've seen the show that Joe and I've been doing for the past few weeks, we kind of point out some good ideas that religion either brought about on its own, or copied off someone else, or whatever. It doesn't matter, and so. But by this guy's definition, he doesn't actually believe in a God. Doesn't that qualify as an atheist?
I would think so.
I personally think so, but
most cases
he doesn't identify that way.
Yeah, there was a book written several years ago, I think maybe back in 40s or 50s, by a guy named Robinson. I wish I could remember his first name, but I can't right now.
Okay, I think we got Jeffrick back.
Another caller.
Oh yeah, Jeffrick, are you there?
I'm here now.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, that was my fault. Yeah.
Well, like I said, the other guy, the third time lucky. So here I am.
Yeah. There we go.
Good.
Anyways, your definition for atheism, I disagree with the one from Jeopardy, and I disagree with the one you put up because it had the word belief.
Yeah.
Before you had the word God.
I think you were on hold, and I commented on that. Go ahead and say it again, though, because I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, some people believe in God. We just don't have that belief, period.
Right, the belief is...
They had it written up there on the screen. It looks like there is a God. We just don't believe in one. And the truth is, there's no such thing. It's a fairy tale. And we don't pretend otherwise.
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of a misconception, because I do think it is a belief that gods don't exist, any gods. And we say it's a belief because if it could be shown otherwise, I think I would be perfectly willing to accept it. And that's why I put it up there as a belief.
We threw up something new right now. I don't know if you still have your TV set or whatever available, but Larry Rhodes is famous for throwing that one up there. And I don't know if that's unique to him, but it's the answer to the question, do you believe in a God or gods? If the answer is no, then you fall under the category of atheism. How's that sound to you?
It works a little better.
Yeah.
I'd rather see whatever you believe in, whatever theology you have. We have no theology.
Right.
A theology.
Right.
That would be the dictionary definition of atheist.
Well, I think if we were to stick with today's show, the misconceptions about atheism, unfortunately, I do think a reasonable or not ignorable number of atheists out there do believe there is no God in a very classical belief sense. I've encountered this a little bit,
I think that's my position.
Okay.
Because you can never know something like that with certainty.
Wait, are you saying there's two atheists? Well, the one on the phone, three atheists here, and at least one of us is not like the other two to a degree. So, myth one busted, just like that.
Well, if you ask me, the only thing atheists have in common is the religious question.
Right.
Outside of religious question, atheists really don't have a lot in common with each other.
That's right. That's right. It's a good point.
That's what our point was on this discussion here, that we're all quite a bit different. And John makes a point that what's so unusual about that? You know, not all Christians are the same either.
Exactly. And I wanted to bring up, like, you know, you got Buddhists. You have all sorts of different people. And Buddhists, in many classical ways that you would put this question, do you believe in a God or gods? They're going to answer that no if you frame what a god is.
Buddhist, it's a religion, but it's not a god concept.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you've got an atheist religion, basically, in that sense. Whereas when I was talking about Shelby Spong, you have an atheist who is a culturally religious, and that's in a Christian sense, even, which is.
Right. Well, that's why I use the word religious question when I was saying my definition of an atheist is someone who has no religious affiliation.
Right.
It's a religious question, not a God question necessarily, but a religious question, and I don't have one.
I don't think so. I think it's a God question. I mean, most atheists reject religion, but there are a lot of people who reject religion who would say they're spiritual or that they believe in God, but they don't accept the religion.
Well, and this comes into.
I never could quite understand what the spiritual thing is.
No.
Even Oprah says, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual.
Yeah,
right.
I don't know.
What the hell does that mean exactly?
I don't think they know.
I don't understand what that means.
I think that is a wishy-washy term.
Right.
And you're reluctant. I'll tell you what, when I said it, I was reluctant to say that I was still religious, and I was. So I would use this term spiritual. And now I'm religious in the sense that I'm humanist. And I might still call that spiritual, but I'm being extremely vague. I'm not defining that, and I don't think it helps to clarify anything. So I agree with your criticism, Jeffrey. And if you were to study this in a lab setting, you know, or a case study with in psychology, they use a word religiosity. Religiosity. Yes. Social workers use this.
Yeah.
And they have a definition for this, but it's still very wishy-washy.
Yeah.
What they're looking for is
I'd like to talk longer, but I got to go right now. So
okay.
Otherwise, I'd like to talk longer.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling in, man.
Yeah, thanks for the input.
We'll look for you again on future programs.
Okay, maybe next time I won't have to try 3 times.
Yes.
Good luck and have a pleasant day.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so maybe we go to myth 2 here.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
This is one that you hear quite a lot. I see it showing up a lot now, that atheists seek to remove religion from society and force all people to be atheists. Now that is just downright wrong. I mean, I think that is said by people who are used to going out and trying to proselytize people into Christianity, at least in this country. Okay? We don't have any tenets. We don't care really if what religion you are, what you have, so long as you don't try to force it on other people.
Right.
And that's the main difficulty we have in this country, that there are a significant group of religious people who want to force, let's say, biblical literacy to be taught in schools.
Right.
And that's what aggravates.
So I want to devil's advocate this one because I've been talking to a group of Christians lately who have been trying to explain the perspective to me a little bit better. And if any of you are actually the people I'm actually talking about are watching today, then call in. But if I say something that rings a bell, give us a holler. When the world that we're living in right now is, you know, you have this nuclear family, Christianity has married itself into this to an extent. It hadn't always been that way, of course.
Yeah.
But you got a man, woman, and we got another call. And right before we get to that, we'll finish this point. But if that's what they're used to seeing and whatnot, then even the sight of something different, personally to them, is being considered. They're being forced to watch it. And that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about being forced. We're talking about legislation that would prevent someone from exercising their own rights. Mm-hmm. And this is that kind of classical, how free do we want society? Do we want it so free that you're free to see anything that you disagree with? Because then you may never encounter it.
Let's take this call.
Go ahead.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. This is Freethought Forum. Can you give us a name or a nickname?
Yeah, this is Al.
Al?
Yeah.
Hey, Al, how's it going? You got a question or comment for us?
Yeah, I wanted to say that every time you guys come on TV, you always seem to bash the Christian religion or the Christian faith or the faith that people have in God.
All right. Do you have Al, do you have a specific
atheism.
Example for us?
Yeah, every program.
No,
is the same
Al.
thing.
Al.
Like you say, what's the
Al.
proof?
Al, you can't preach on the show.
God?
Al.
Where's the proof for God?
All right.
You said.
Sorry, Al. We've gone over this 100 times. You need at least a question or comment to start off with.
Yeah. Okay. So in any case, well, yeah. Let's get back to this question.
Well, yeah. So when you are in such a place, when the framework of society is such that any idea alternative of your framework is you find offensive, should you be allowed to be so free that you can completely ignore all that? An example, like the Quakers, even they don't take it that much to that extent. They use vaccination now. There's a variety of things that they've assimilated into their culture. Mm-hmm. Well, look at the gay marriage issue, or I should say marriage equality. Mm-hmm. Just allowing a homosexual marriage does not breach your liberties. It does force you, to some extent, to accommodate that in society.
Yeah.
But you've got to bear in mind, you have the right to marry. You have another person in society who doesn't. And allowing that, granted, does intrude in this mindset. Your mindset, we're talking about legally. Yeah. And you're saying that you can be free. It's a double standard. You can be free, but they can't. And that's where you have to, this is where we have to learn to work together. This is what the American experiment was and was very successful with for at least a time. And now it seems to be, there's a lot of friction around it again.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the gay marriage is a good point. What does it hurt somebody who's in a straight marriage if a couple of other people want a gay marriage? Is the question, right? Mm-hmm. And I've heard people tell me, oh, yes, it's going to hurt me and my family, something like that. But they can't show any particular way that it can do that.
All right, got another call. We'll let them on the air here. Yes, hello, caller. Could we have a name or nickname?
Hello, my name's Jeremy.
Hello, Jeremy.
Jeremy, hello.
The reason I was calling in is I'm a Christian. I just flew through stations and noticed this, and you said people are trying to force biblical literacy.
I'm sorry, say again?
I'm a Christian who has flew through the channels and viewed this program, and you said biblical literacy, that they were forcing it into schools and things like that.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by biblical literacy being forced into schools.
I used that question, and I used it mainly with reference, say, to the conflict between teaching creationism versus teaching evolutionary biology.
Yeah, the context is a science classroom for that. Yeah.
Well, my whole thing is everyone's so scared to mention the Bible that I know people my own age and younger who I mentioned something like David and Goliath, tried to, as an example,
right.
I'm saying that my situation, they don't know what I'm talking about. They don't know the references.
Oh, right. They don't understand the story. Okay.
Literature.
Right.
And I think there's a literary value to it that needs to be kept.
Well, you're absolutely right there.
Regardless of your faith, I think it's there's a literary value that is being lost with what's going on.
Well, I agree with you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
You know, the Bible's been a very important book in the history of Western civilization. And I do think that kids should have a course of, to be taught in schools on the history of the Bible and what the Bible says, etc. Make an elective course if they want to. But so long as it is taught from the scholarly perspective of what people have learned, what scholars have learned about when the Bible was written and why these stories are in there and what they mean, etc. And not from the point of view of trying to say, well, this is the Word of God and you have to believe everything literally that's in it.
Yeah. Do you see what we mean, or do you maybe want to pick a bone with that, Jeremy?
No, I don't have a problem with that. I just see a problem. I have a problem with a lot of people who use the term atheism as an excuse to be anti-Christian.
Oh.
It's not that I have anything against atheism, but I know a lot of people who just really dislike Christianity and use that as an excuse.
Right.
It'd be nice if we could hear atheists say something about their opinions of Islam or Hinduism or other things.
Did you
never really touched that?
Did you tune in last week?
Well,
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Well, I think you're wrong about that.
Yeah.
Atheists certainly have the same views with respect to other religions. They don't just single out Christianity. It's a matter of what we consider to be the scientific truth versus what is revealed truth.
Hang on, let me bring a little context into what Jeremy's saying here. I think I kind of get what part of his problem is. Jeremy, you live here. You lived here for a while, Knoxville, or where do you?
Yeah, I was born here.
Okay, so me too, man. And growing up, when I was a Christian, all the way up till I'd say about 17, the most critical thing that I was anything if I was critical against, it was other Christians. And the reason for that is because everyone else around me was a Christian. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And so later on, I eventually stopped calling myself a Christian, and I didn't know any Muslims in high school. I didn't know any Muslims even in the first college I went to. I just had no frame of reference but Christianity, and so
that's not the way it is for me. I mean, I go to Pellissippi.
Well, yeah, me actually, yeah. Go ahead. Are you still with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Even in high school, I mean, I didn't know anyone who identified with Islam, but I knew someone identified with Buddhism, one person. It's just that I just have a different perspective. Maybe it's I know more people or have a different point of view, but everyone I know who's been atheist, who's described themselves that, has used that as best Christianity, but it's as if it seems that they're afraid to say something about Islam, obviously, because of,
There is some of that. That is true. You're right. There is some of that.
Well, I don't know. I don't necessarily find it. And say in the discussions that the so-called new atheists have had, like Dawkins.
Right. No, you won't find it there. Yeah. No, they're critical across the board.
Right.
But I think what Jeremy might be talking to is if like people you know in person, right, around here or something.
Right. Yeah. I think the problem that comes in there is that most people don't know anything about those other religions, or at least they don't know anyone who practices those other religions. And so if they say they're atheists, where they see the counter force coming from is from Christianity. So
yeah, this is like okay, let me.
I feel like I'm being picked on a little.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I understand your perspective, and I'd like to ease it up a bit, but I also I understand. I mean, let's look at a real thing that's happened in recent time. Proposition 8, California. This was pushed by two large groups of people. Do you know who those two people were?
The Mormon Church
and the Catholic Church.
And the Catholic Church.
So mostly the Mormons. They did most of the funding.
They did a lot of the organizing. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But the Catholics were extremely interested in this. At least those Catholics that wanted that, and. There weren't, I'm sure I could find Muslims in this country that would have been for that. I'm sure I could find them. But because they were the ones that held such a strong position, the setback, when you talk about it, they're gonna take a lot of the criticism too. And I understand that all Christians aren't the same. I understand that all Catholics aren't the same. There are lots of Catholics that are like, fine, gay marriage is cool. But you've got to realize that, unfortunately, you had those two organizations push. Look at Knoxville, Tennessee. You got a lot of people in Tennessee wanting to take us back about 90 years and start teaching creationism in our classrooms, in a science classroom. Now, we were talking about literacy earlier, biblical literacy. If you want to elective, if you want to discuss religious text in an academic classroom, there's no problem there. But if you want to put a creationist perspective inside of a science classroom, then you have a huge problem. And so, because of who's making that push, they get the backlash from it. Do you kind of? That probably doesn't help you a lot, but I mean, I'm kind of hoping that if I tell you where it's coming from, it'll kind of at least help you understand where it's coming from, you know?
Yeah. My whole thing is, I'm not for excluding evolution. I think that's kind of ridiculous too, to try to push evolution away. It'd just be nice if, as like a footnote, they said evolution is theory by so much of them, the majority, and there's a small group who says X, Y, or Z as a footnote. It'd be nice, you know.
Okay. Well, let me.
That would be a reason,
right.
But
well,
I think it's gone way too far.
Well, I think, check this out. Let me say I did put the footnote there. Now I have to put a footnote right below that one that says, we also have a group of people who disagree with them and think that we live on top of a giant tortoise. Then I have to take another footnote and I have to say, well, there's these other people, you know, and so that's why I said in the context of a science classroom, because creationism is not suspect to the, well, some aspects of creationism are not suspect to the lens of science.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the kind that isn't. I'm talking about the, like, intelligent design, things that can be tested.
Okay, intelligent design can technically be tested, however, it's never been shown to exist. There's no scientific paper on it. So you can't, you see what I mean? So even in a scientific
it's kind of different than just religious indoctrination. It's just the theory that there may be a supernatural origin.
Okay, that's fine, but that's again an untestable thing.
That's a very broad thing that covers all the different faiths. I just would like people to realize that not everyone believes evolution. Not that.
Well, that's true.
Evolution is not a belief system.
That's true. Yeah, it's not.
It's a science, and there are facts.
It's a theory.
And there are facts connected with evolution, and there is a theory of evolution. Theory does not mean a hypothesis in scientific terms. A theory in scientific terms is something that's very well documented, both with physical observations and with a general narrative that hooks all of those observations together.
It includes facts about reality.
Theory in the sense of, it's a theory that's proven in the sense of, like, microevolution of mutation, but then it's also a grandiose theory that everything evolved from one thing, and that's kind of a separate macroevolution. It's kind of a separate thing, but they're all kind of mixed together. The term is kind of vague sometimes.
I'm going to say that even though we weren't devoted to this, I do like to have this conversation, but we weren't devoted to this topic. But I will say that as long as the scientific consensus goes with it, put it in the scientific classroom. We're talking about educating children. The theory of evolution, just so that you know, just like the theory of gravity, the theory of gravity is not a law. The attraction of matter is something of a fact. That's not. There are some repulsive theories, but do you see how that's even suspect in some ways?
I don't see that the same thing.
Right, but I'm telling you it is.
There are people who call themselves scientists who do believe otherwise. They're a minority, but you know, But
science isn't about beliefs. Science is about being able to test your hypotheses and either falsify them.
Exactly. They have scientific theories that have, like,
no, they don't.
Design.
They don't.
Intelligent design is not a scientific theory.
Yeah, it's a
a theory that's not proven. All I'm saying is I want to be mentioned, not taught or.
Then I'll tell you what you have to do. Okay. You have to provide evidence. You have to have peer review of a paper. It has to be repeated and verified under stringent conditions, just like everyone else's work.
Yeah, I think that's. I think this.
There are peer-reviewed papers. The Institute for Creation Research. They have.
No, there aren't. There are 0 papers peer-reviewed from creation research. 0 papers.
This is a very good conversation, Jeremy. I think we're going to take.
I think we're going to move on.
Take a little break here right now and move on to a different subject. So thank you very much for.
Well, thanks for your call.
Yeah. So. Could we play our promotional now?
Yeah, we do appreciate the call, but today we gotta.
Scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
Right, welcome back. We're in the middle of what is atheism and some of the myths surrounding atheism. Also want to remind everybody, since we just had our mid-program break, the book club is going to be The Story of the Human Body, Evolution, Teeth, and Disease by Daniel Lieberman. That's for the Rationalists of East Tennessee meeting.
So do we have another call here?
I think we're waiting on it.
It's being screened.
It's being screened. Okay.
Myth 3. We'll spend just a brief moment. Atheists have no morals since they don't have a belief in God.
Yeah, I think that's the one that really upsets me an awful lot.
Right. I think I've heard religious, this is the common one, is I've heard, and I'll say the common one for you, Jeremy, because you're right, it's not everyone. But you'll have a religious person. I was wearing a t-shirt in the gym that just said I'm an atheist. It basically said nothing else and had a definition of what that is. And a guy walks up and he says, you know, I know you're a good guy, but how do you know when to do right or wrong? So he's confronting the fact, he's already accepted that I know the difference, that I have morals, when you think about it. But he doesn't understand how it's possible. And I thought, I've actually never had anyone say it that way. I've always had the accusation. You don't believe in God, how can you have morals? So he's still asking the same question, but he certainly didn't approach me in the same way.
He's asking, how did you determine what is right and wrong?
And I answered with empathy. I mean, the same way that chimps do, I'm just better at it. And I've had a lot of people come before me, and even religious people that came up with some very good ideas.
Yeah.
And I've copied them and used them.
Yeah. Well.
And I've used empathy, but yeah.
Yes, to me that's the answer of what morals are. It's empathy for other people or other creatures.
I think empathy.
That's how you develop your ethical outlook in life.
But if I were to criticize empathy, I mean, there are criticisms. Sometimes some people lack it. Some people have mechanisms that they operate on, ideas that are wrong or fallacious, and they make bad decisions based on empathy or a lack of empathy. And so I think that bothers people who have a religious framework.
There are people that don't have empathy. I mean, the RET meeting last week was a lecture by a fellow named Button on what we can learn from psychopaths.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty interesting. But just the fact that some people don't have empathy, I don't think throws that out. To me, your morals come from empathy for other people and other living things.
Right. They evolve just almost basically like a gene does, just not biologically like one does. It takes time, we test them, and they get adopted. And sometimes they're still wrong, like slavery. Got adopted for a long time. Some people would say that our minimum wage workers are slaves now. you know, when is fair fair? It's subject to scrutiny at all times, and we just try to improve on it, and that's where I'd say we get our morals from.
No. Okay.
Let's move on to myth 4. Do you have?
Okay, myth number 4.
Atheists are pushing a negative sentiment and have a dreary life. Actually, I had somebody call up while Joe and I were on. Man, aren't you guys just soppy and sad that there's no God?
This brings up a story that a few years back, a Sunday school group got in touch with Larry Rhodes, our executive producer, and they were trying to find out about other religions. And so they invited him and some other people over to their house, and so the one guy's house in any case. And so Larry went and I went, Joe Barnhart went, and Dale Hayes, who's now heading up the S group, went over, the 4 of us. And we had a nice little conversation. And at the end, somebody said, well, what did you people from the Sunday school group learn? And the one guy said, well, I learned that not all atheists are really sort of hangdog sourpusses and unhappy and something like that. He seemed absolutely amazed, you know, that we weren't that much different from what they were so far as our outlook.
Right.
And I find that strange, but I just wonder if they get told so much by their preacher or by their church members that to be happy you have to have God. That's what makes you happy.
There certainly are frameworks of religion, ideologies that get on that kick. God is part of everything.
Yeah.
And so for them, I guess I could see how a lack of that, from their perception, might add to that misconception. We got a call here. Yeah. Hello, caller. You're live on the air. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
Just call me Larry.
Larry.
Hello, Larry.
All right. Hey, Larry.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing all right.
I wanted to address something the previous caller was talking about.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
How you know he wants them to teach biblical stories and biblical references in school. You did right to tell them that we pretty much would have to teach every single religion to show equality.
Right.
We wouldn't have time for any other subjects.
Well, I was thinking like that's the trick though. We wanted the equal time, but I only have an hour to teach this subject, and it's a scientific subject. So if you can produce results, then by all means.
Well, not only that, but they can teach them. There's no law against teaching them in the home, in churches. There are hundreds of movies out there, plays, pageants, teaching the story of Christianity. There are displays all over the country. But he wants the public schools to teach it as well, which is a government endorsement of religion. That's against the law. It's unconstitutional.
Right.
Larry, I think there's a difference between teaching religion and teaching the origins of the Bible and how those stories came to be written, and why, say, most of them in the Old Testament, like the Exodus or the invasion of Canaan, are just not true. They're not borne out by any other.
Agree. And we need religious education. We do need that. However, I'm pretty sure that that's not how he wanted it taught. I'm projecting here. I could be wrong.
I think you may be projecting a bit, but you know, Jeremy had a very his perspective, I can see this. He was being very honest. He feels like he's under the attack, and it's perceptual. So I can understand his reaction. But go ahead.
Let me speak to that too. He's always talking. What he was talking about how we're anti-Christian, but he never said a single thing about how Christian is anti-atheism. And
right.
How, you know, every other preacher on the block or every other TV show that has Christian on it bashes atheists.
Right, and then there's
think the other side of that.
There's the religion versus religion. Strangely, you bring up a good point. The rise of the new atheist brings this religion versus atheist battlefront, which is very strange, because when you see this on YouTube and whatnot, or you go to something locally or wherever, those people would be at each other's throats in another setting.
Right.
And
I actually had
I think it's a good thing for us to have the criticism come in that way, but it is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had a woman ask me one time, or tell me one time, that she thought that the TV show that we have on is hate speech. because, you know, I had to remind her that, you know, whenever a preacher pretty much gets up in front of a camera, he's always talking hate against homosexual, hate against anti-theists or atheists or other some kind of religion or other religious belief, anything. But as soon as the shoe's on the other foot, they just can't take it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think you're right. Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say, and y'all have a good show. It's doing good.
Thanks for calling.
Okay. Thank you, Larry.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for calling in.
Let's move on to number 5. Or do you think we could?
That's okay.
Atheists cannot know there is a God since you cannot prove he doesn't exist.
Yeah, well,
Or cannot know there is no God.
yeah.
Yeah. So you got a lot of knots in here. So I'm digging through it. I'm trying to think of it another way. But this is about the most simple way you can state this.
Yeah, and this comes back to what I said at the beginning of our discussion of what atheism is,
Right.
perhaps. And that is that in general you cannot prove a universal negative. I
Right.
mean, I cannot prove that there is no God, just as I cannot prove there's no pink unicorn somewhere
And
on Earth.
So why should we even attempt to prove a negative? We shouldn't.
No.
We should just
no.
abandon. Yeah.
But the point is, what we do is we look around and we try to find some evidence
Right.
that there's a God somewhere, some kind of God. I don't know what religion defines it. Let's say we're surrounded by Christians here. That's what we think of mostly, okay? And so the point is that what science does is not prove that something is true, but it narrows the possibilities down as to what can be an explanation.
Yeah, positive
for
proof
natural
claims
phenomena.
are very rare and comparatively in science, and they're also harder to do.
Right,
Yeah.
and we tend often to approach the best theories piecewise, step by step, where things we thought 400 years ago, like Newton's law of gravity, become superseded by general relativity, which is just about 100 years old right now. And it doesn't mean that that we still don't use Newton's law. In fact, that gets people to the moon. That's what we use. It just means that when you dig deeper into it, it's more complex.
Right. We have to use Einstein for other things, and then check it out. You gotta skip around him for even other things.
And so what science does is try to narrow down what are the possibilities to explain a phenomenon. And in no case have we ever found that we need a God to explain some phenomenon. Now, you can take the position, well, if the science can't explain it, then there has to be a God. And this is the default position of the theists. It has been all through the centuries.
No, you don't know, therefore.
Yeah, and that's a false dichotomy.
Right.
One does not follow the other.
I don't know, I think, is a perfectly acceptable answer, personally. And now we can talk about, because we're talking about knowledge, we can talk about agnosticism and Gnosticism. And I like to put them together. I like to call myself an agnostic atheist. There's a lot that I don't know. I don't believe in a God. That's the position I find myself in.
But it comes back to what we talked about at the beginning. That is that you may not believe in it, but if the evidence is there, you are open-minded enough to be willing to change your position.
Right.
You don't have the Ken Ham position that nothing would ever change your mind on what you believe.
Right. The Bill Nye exposed that set of logic there, or at least the framework, showing that he's not culpable to any reason at that point. What would change your mind?
Yeah.
And I guess a question that I hear, you hear Pascal's wager, which is, you'd be better off believing just in case God is real.
Right.
What would you say, or as it's phrased sometimes, what would you say at the gates, St. Peter and all that other, and at that point, so just so you would know, I think I would say, well, I guess I believe in God. Not sure I want in. But I don't have a choice anyhow, it turns out, and that would just be the end of it, right? I mean,
we've done shows on Pascal's wager before. I mean, Larry and I did one, I don't know, about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I think, in pretty good detail, and you can read a lot of analyses, philosophical analyses about Pascal's wager to show that it isn't a particularly good wager.
But
So-
I mean, basically, we just so myth 5. You know, it's not about telling whether or not there's a God. It's just what I like the way Nye phrased this regarding evolution and science. What predictions can I make? What service will this do for society? How do I understand what I think is reality more? How do I do that? And asking about whether or not there's a God, I think has roots in reason. I think intelligent design is a logical position. If you can't answer, if let's say we didn't have any Darwinian natural selection, we didn't have these understandings, you might still say, I don't know how everything's done, and I would call myself probably an agnostic atheist. However, without those ideas, most people I think would do that in our circles, I would probably be inclined to say, well, I'm an agnostic theist. I mean, it seems reasonable to me that some greater power could do this because I lack the resources. In a way, Newton did this. He invoked intelligent design. I lack the ability to describe the motions of the celestial bodies at this point. He could do 2 systems and whatnot, but beyond that, he didn't know. And so, at least that's a reasonable position.
Yeah, and people often quote Newton as a guy, here's a very famous scientist, maybe the most famous that ever lived, and yet he was a theist. Well, of course, 400 years ago, everybody was a theist in a sense.
Yeah.
But Newton, despite developing a law of universal gravitation, which, as you say, works well for 2 bodies, but in the solar system, you have all these other planets around.
He couldn't figure it out. Yeah.
And you cannot easily do that for a multi-body system. And in fact, he thought that the perturbations caused by the other planets would eventually take the Earth out of its orbit, and do so periodically, and that God had to intervene and restart the planets in their orbits.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm just pointing out the logical portions of it, because even then, you would not want to say, atheists cannot know there is no God, since you cannot prove he doesn't exist. That would still be an unreasonable way to look at the question.
Yeah, but the question, as I frame it, it's always probabilities, and that is, what is the probability that there is a God? And to say that you think there can be some probability, you'd surely like to have a little bit of evidence that a God could explain something.
Yeah, and without evidence, don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, don't be afraid to say, I'm speculating. Don't be, you know, these are honest things, and you can speculate all you want. But at the end of the day, if you want it in your science classroom, as Jeremy requested, you need to supply the evidence. It needs to be testable and repeatable, all that good stuff.
I mean, the burden's not on us to prove there is no God. I mean, the burden's on the theists to prove that there's something that can't be explained otherwise. Not just something we don't know and take the default position, the false dichotomy position, but show something that just couldn't be true without there being supernatural intervention.
Right. This goes right up to your myth 6, which we don't really have time to talk about, but which we just kind of dismissed. Closed-minded atheist, you can't see miracles happen?
Right.
This is the same thing. Claim, and then evidence to support it. I'm sorry, your miracle just doesn't add up.
Right. Some people, they see God in nature. How you can believe there's no God when you go out in the woods, you have this babbling brook and this beautiful sunrise and all these furry creatures running around. You have to believe in a God.
Yeah.
Do you? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've now come to the end of our program here. We have about a minute to go. So it's about time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper.
This has been a Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
So please send us feedback. You can leave a voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. We'd like to thank Joseph, I can't remember the second, like Hemos or something, Jeffrick, Jeremy, and Larry. I think we had another one maybe. I can't remember. Thanks for all the calls.
Yeah, thanks for all the calls. And our thanks to Sam and Jonas for technical help, and to the staff at CTV.